want to officially introduce you to Jessica. I met Jessica at the Camrose Open Door. I don't know how long ago that was, but it was
Last
winter.
December.
Yes, yes. I remember it being cold and snowing, and just absolutely fell in love with the person who Jessica is, her passion, her drive to really help families. I mean, that was just very obvious to me. She's a registered provincial psychologist with more than 15 years of experience working in the human services field. And she's still here. And look at her, she's still smiling and she's not bitter. You know what? That's what I'm talking about. She's spent her career working with youth and families and pioneering systems change. This is why I love this woman. And I love that you believe in working differently to respond to the needs of youth and their families to build strong and capable futures. I love that. I love that so much. And so I want to welcome you here. And Jessica, I just want you to feel free to just lead us, and then we'll just chat along the way.
Sure. This is awesome. Thank you for having me. I think we share the same sentiments around systems change and how passionate we are about this work and our kids, because this is what it's all about, is our kids and what we're going to be doing with our kids and how generations moving forward are going to look and all this fun stuff. So I think you and I have had some interesting conversations around control. So that was sort of what we were going to talk about today. And that sort of comes from my work as a therapist. So I do lots of family therapy, do some therapy with youth. And I'm just really watching this interesting shift right now of these families that really are resilient and really do have a lot of coping skills. But because the pandemic has completely shifted on us, this sense of us being out of control, as in the parents being out of control, our lives have changed. We have to grocery shop different. We have to do our work different. Everything is different in our life. We've been stripped of our control. We don't have answers. We don't know what the future is going to look like. And that has completely changed our world. Humans don't do well with change. And we have been completely stripped of our control. So then what is an interesting thing that happens when we've been stripped of control and we don't feel like we have control is that then we try to control our environment. Of course we do, because where else are we going to get that sense of control? So we try to control our environment. And often what that can look like is when we swing and we go, okay, now I'm going to try to control my environment, is then what we try to do is we control the humans in it. And then we start having problems. And this is sort of what is starting to show up, I'm seeing, in around us, where people are really kind of running out of time and patience at home, and they're starting to try to control their environment, and they're starting to try to control their kids. And we're seeing vicious cycles start. Because as soon as you try to control your child, who's also out of control, you will have a power struggle, and it will break down, and yelling begets yelling, and emotional crisis begets emotional crisis, and here we go in a very bad, vicious circle. So what I am starting to really focus on with families is, how do we have parents retain control so that they feel like they've got this control, and then they're able to help their children be in control. And you put the most amazing thing up the other day about this session is people don't trust those who can't control their emotions. So isn't that interesting? So if mom and dad are kind of off the top crazy with their emotions and they can't handle it, what do you think our kids are going to do? They're going with us. And then we just have chaos in the house. And then mom and dad start yelling because they can't handle the chaos. And then we just have an epic explosion all over. And then probably we start doing parenting techniques like trying to push our children away and go have a timeout and go sit by themselves. And isn't this the premise of your like bring them closer that we're talking about?
That's very familiar.
Right? So all of this kind of goes backwards to control. So what we want to talk about today is, how do we not overcompensate? How do we actually help our kids? How do we feel and control starts with us. You're not going to be able to help your child unless you've helped yourself first. And so many times I say that to parents, you can't pour from an empty vessel. And honestly, lots of times when I say that to parents, they're like, yeah, okay, so when am I going to get time to stop to do that? And I'm like, if you don't, we're going to have a bigger problem. So I'm sorry, but you're going to have to stop and make the choice, because we have to do something different. So I really strongly encourage parents to make this swing, because your children are watching you right now. They're trying to figure out how to deal with this by watching what you're doing. So if you're out of control all the time, they're going to follow suit. This is, I mean, we're just talking before everyone signed on here about like, what are we learning out of COVID? This is the prime time to teach your kids how to deal with crisis. This is an opportune time. We may have an opportunity like this again to teach our children how to process and deal with crisis. It doesn't have to be all about the traumatic impact and the psychological impact and everything we lost and everything. It can be about how did we develop resilience? How did we learn to cope differently? How are we a stronger family now? Or how do I have stronger relationships now? It can be monumentally huge in the learning experience we have if we're willing to shift our focus. It's not that it's our kids that's going to do this, it's going to be our focus. So, like I mentioned, no one likes change. So we have to accept that change first in ourselves. We have to be okay with the fact that none of us know what's going on right now. It's okay. It's okay not to be okay. And that's something I think I've said over and over and over to so many parents and so many individuals, because typically when we see somebody, we say, "Hi, how are you?" And people go, "Good." And one of the things I've been saying when people come into counseling is, "But are you? Are you good?" And then they go, "No, actually, I'm not." And they say, "This is actually what I am." So right away, we need to take away this pressure of saying, it's good. It's not good. Maybe it's okay, but you know what? It's different. And so then how do we accept that we're okay as parents, as humans, with it being different? How are we okay with that? Okay, I'm okay with the fact that it needs to be different. The second that we stop pressuring ourselves to remain in control and have the answers will be the second we feel like, okay, I can take a deep breath here. I'll be okay. So then we can move forward from, okay, how do I actually operationalize this? How do I mobilize this? So how do I feel like I'm in control? That looks like a lot of things. We may not be able to control what goes on in the outside world. So everything's been stripped of us. We can't take our kids grocery shopping, or we haven't been able to for the longest time. All of the sports activities are gone. Our weekends look different. We can't have family barbecues. All the things that were our support and for a lot of us, our coping strategies, going to the gym, girls' night out, all of this, we've been stripped of that. So then what are your coping skills? What are you putting in place that you can do differently to help yourself? And then what can we do for our family? So things like that are like, the first set of that is, okay, how can we deal with this as ourselves? What do we need to do for ourselves? Well, that's case specific. Some people like to journal. Some people hate it. Some people like to, be able to have FaceTime talks. Some people hate it. Do what you want to do. I'm not here to prescribe what I think is wrong or right. Do what makes your heart happy. That's where we're at. But then things you can do for your family once you've kind of got that control. You can put a schedule and routine in place. Boy, is that ever important right now, because everything that we had scheduled and everything that was our routine was stripped of us. So our kids very much then are out of control because they don't know what they're controlling. And it's even things like what they're wearing in the morning for the little ones, because maybe we used to have a routine where they picked their clothes the night before and now we don't. Or maybe laundry days are different and they recognize that because there used to be a routine where mom and dad did it on the weekend and now there's not. So all of that has been stripped. So now we go, okay, we need to have a schedule and routine, even a loose one at home, just a very loose one. I'm not talking about a major schedule and routine that says that at 10 o'clock we do this and at 9 o'clock we do this, because you're just going to put pressure on yourself. I'm talking about whether that's eating breakfast, eating lunch, eating supper, or whether that's what time you get dressed. Just a loose framework that doesn't put too much stress on your family. Different things you can do in that. You can then, once you have a scheduled routine, then you know what pressure and what time you have, and there's no pressure in that for what am I supposed to do now? It's your kids know mommy has to go do this or daddy has to do this at this time, and then they'll be back at this time or whatever it is. It helps the kids to process and feel like they have some sense of control. I know what I've been using for my little one is a calendar themselves. I've been building just a calendar with pictures because he's only just about 4. So it's just pictures. What does your day look like? So that he has a sense of control, because it feels so different. And one of the things I've noticed is this movement from the weekend into the weekday. These younger kids don't have a real idea of why there's Saturday and Sunday and mom and dad are completely around, and then Monday they have to disappear. Like, what's changed? So having this, routine and having a schedule and talking to our kids about it. So that's the next big thing. Talk to your kids about what's going on. Talk about what they're feeling. Are they scared? Are they, what is going on? And this is from kids that are little that barely have language to our teenagers. What are they feeling? What is going on? It's okay not to be okay. You know, that's a saying we keep repeating over and over. What does this look like? And I saw this awesome little sort of meme the other day. I think it was the Children's Institute that put this out. And it was, you might see an increase in the little ones with certain behaviors around their difference in play, around, you know, things like superheroes or paramedics or things like that, where they're starting to process that this is what's going on and it might look a little bit different. So their play is going to look different. Our teenagers, you know, I mean, our poor teenagers are supposed to graduate this year. Their world is shaken. Everything is up in the air. They're ripped of so much right now. And so how do we give them the words to be okay with what they've been stripped with and allow them to have this kind of thought process around, I can be mad at this and I can be, you know, angry about what happened to me, but then what do I do with that moving forward? Like, how do I process that and what do I do with that? And then the next piece that I would think of would be around, once you're having these conversations with your kids, being open and honest about when somebody's frustrated in the house and what that does, and as well as taking accountability and responsibility for your own emotions. So if somebody has an emotional explosion, taking the responsibility for that and apologizing if need be. And that includes us as parents. We need to be taking accountability for our actions. We're not always, I know, gasp, we're not always right. And that is what happens. So what does that look like when we're not? Or what does that look like when we should have taken a breath and stepped back and instead we went into the situation and tried to control? How do we get ourselves back out? And you know what? Sometimes that's literally just going, stop, I'm taking a step back here and I'm going to go for 2 minutes and then I'm going to come back to you. Or if you have a little one, putting yourself and the child together in a time in on the stairs. Like, okay, we both need to calm down here. We're both just going to sit side by side here and have some breathing time together. And I think when our children see us taking accountability for our actions, they in turn learn it's okay to take accountability for theirs. So that's a huge part. That to me is something that I feel like we could be teaching our kids a lot of right now, because we could be modeling this whole thing around how do we take accountability for our actions and what do we do when we're feeling really stressed out. Be gentle with yourself. Be gentle with your children. We don't need, if pressure is too much for them right now, you know, we were talking about like all the different roles we're in right now. Like we're trying to teach and we're trying to do this and do that. And, you know, I am not a qualified day home operator and I'm not a qualified preschool teacher. And let me tell you, I don't think I'm paying my day home enough. And I really don't think we're paying teachers enough, because wow, are they ever. And I think a lot of us have said that. You've seen these funny little memes about, you know, like people driving by and saying, you know, turns out it was like, you're not the bad teacher, I'm actually my kid, right? So like taking accountability for that. But this is this feeling of like, okay, how do we take control in a situation? How do I be gentle in a situation? And that being gentle is a form of taking control of ourselves, because we're choosing that in the moment. We're choosing how we're going to react. So not letting our kids press our buttons so that we're skyrocketing with them, but actively choosing to take control in that situation. Say, I'm not going with you. I'm going to have the adult brain here and I'm going to pull us back in and I'm going to regulate with you. And those are words that, you know, maybe are quite foreign in our language around how we parent our children. I actually use the concept with my almost 4-year-old about how can I help you regulate? Because I have taught him about what regulation is. So how do I help you regulate? And he has sort of a selection of 4-year-old things that he thinks of. And one of them is to have a shower or bath. And another one is just to take some time to sit on the stairs. And he has his blankies and a few things like that. Like he has quite a repertoire of things that we can say, how do I help you regulate? And so teaching our children that, how do I help you regulate? What does that look like for you? What can I help you do? And offering that help to our children so that they can go, oh, okay, in this situation, I may feel out of control, but now I know how to message for myself to get myself what I need. And that as adults is something we need to be doing as well too, is how do we do that? How do we message for what we need in a world where honestly, not a lot of people are listening to our needs right now because it's so chaotic. So then what do we do for ourselves? How do we say, okay, well, you know what? I'm not going to sit down and play the victim. I'm going to go out for myself and I'm going to figure out what I need here. And that might be conversation between husband and wife of who needs what time together to figure this out. Mom and dad need this. You know, how do we figure this out? What do we need for our children? Who can we call on? One of the things that we have used in our home is that while grandma lives a province away, she's still available to do FaceTime interaction with our son. And so she has been able to kind of spell us off for half an hour here and there, and they do their book reading and they play games and things like that. So he's able to have a sense of connection outside of us, and we're able to get that, 10 minutes of make a tea and, go to the bathroom and send a few emails. So what are we doing, and we're reaching out, and how are we reaching out for help? We're a society right now, and a generation taught not to ask for help, taught to figure it out. And especially those who are in a mothering role, you do it yourself, you figure it out. Why? What's the point to that? And I would question how well that's working for us. So,
Absolutely.
right? So,
I asked a group of parents once, what do you need? And none of them could answer me.
yeah.
And that concerned me.
Yeah.
I think you bring up some really good points here, because I feel like COVID has brought us back to what does it look like to be actually human? And
Yes.
it really shows you how inhumane we've
Mhm.
been living as a
Yes.
society.
Right?
The way that we kind of are raising our kids is well, if we come back to things like, let me come alongside you. What do you need to regulate? How can I listen? How can I come alongside? That's not the way our society allows us to parent when we are just out there hustling and bustling and being crazy
Mhm.
and being so busy, or we don't have time to regulate.
Yes.
If right now we have this beautiful opportunity to learn what regulation looks like for us because we have some time.
Mhm.
So I
Mhm.
think that you're right on the money here.
It's interesting because you're exactly right there around we do have time to learn this, and I think it starts with us. Our children are not going to learn this unless we have learned it, and unless that language is familiar to them in their home life, whatever their home life looks like. If this is familiar to them, they will start to use it. Our children only have around them what we put around them, and right now that's it. They don't even have school, right? They don't have that buffer. So it is, we're trying not to put more pressure on parents, but it is up to us. But it's also giving us a beautiful opportunity to have this conversation with our children and with each other about how am I actually doing, and where's my sense of control within myself, so that I don't get caught in a vicious circle with my 4-year-old in a power struggle that ends up with there needing to be time apart rather than together.
Yeah. In my book, I say that we are our children's prefrontal cortex.
There you go.
All right. Like we are the ones who create that development right here of
Mhm.
problem solving and reasoning. And I think a
Mhm.
lot of parents, when our kids are losing it, whether they're 4 or whether they're 18, it doesn't matter. It's kind of all the same, really. They lose it and we think like, go calm down or go figure it out. And we don't realize that the mental health of
Mhm.
our brains actually comes from this interpersonal neurobiology of you and me. And as the adult, I don't know who decided that we were allowed to be like this, have this much power, but we're the ones, you're right. We're the ones that set the tone. We're the ones that, how I regulate is how my kids regulate. And
Yeah.
sometimes when they're losing it, I'm like, oh my Lord, there I am. Like there, right?
Yes.
And so, like what you were talking about taking time, and some people were listing out some of the things that they do to take that time for themselves, like working out, and yes, HGTV counts, like taking that time that you need so that you can come to your family with more ability to emotionally regulate. Whereas if you take no time for yourself, you're going to find yourself reacting, and then your emotions are up and down, and when our emotions go from extremes to extremes, we build this unstable emotional environment that makes everyone walk on eggshells. And I'm sure everybody here might know what that feels like, to be around somebody who makes you feel like you're walking on eggshells. And so I know a lot of parents signed up for this today because they're like, could you please help me bring control
Mhm.
back? My teenager is out of control.
Mhm.
They're talking back. They're snarky. There's lots of, or my kid is not listening to me
Yes.
anymore.
Yes.
How do I get them to listen? And so
Mhm.
what you're saying is that actually right here, it starts right here. That's probably not what everyone wanted to hear, was it?
Probably not. Probably not. Yes, but it does. Because my question when somebody says to me, is my kid is not listening, is my question usually is, how are we talking to them? So, what does that look like? Are they emotionally heightened when you're speaking to them? And it's like talking to a brick wall. It's like when a child's going up in a tantrum, talking to them is actually the last thing. And there's not like, just to be clear on this, because you talk about the research of like the neurobiological part. There's lots of research around this, around connection being, what is so valuable, and that we're doing more work around connection and things like. So there's lots of research around this. I think this is not just something that people are making up. But there's lots of this conversation about if we can just help ourselves to bring ourselves down. And I think the other piece there that's really important to mention is if we need to learn to identify our own emotions. So then our child can identify the emotions, and then we can. So when our child is not listening to us and we're saying to them, and one of the things that catches me, and I don't claim to be perfect at using this because I am not, and I'm trying really hard, is somebody asked me one day, another therapist said to me, why are you asking your child what's wrong? Because you're implying that there's something negative. And I was like, oh boy. And you know what? Now that I've said that, and I guess I probably should apologize I've said that, because you'll now realize how many times you say it, because it catches me every time I say that, because we're ingrained in our society to say, what's wrong? As soon as somebody starts to cry, what's wrong? And we're instantly implying to them wrong equals bad. And so instead of that, what's wrong, we go, I see you're distressed, or I see you're crying. How can I help you? What can I do with you? Where can I be with you? So changing even that response, because two things, when we ask somebody what's wrong, we're kind of putting them on the defense, as well as when we say to them, how can I help you? And we haven't yet taught them what that looks like, we will also put them on the defense. So we have to teach them, how can I help you? And if we're starting the process of teaching them, how can I help you? Can I blank, blank, blank? So what are some things? So give them options of choices. So if you have a child that you've given them lots of choices, then you can certainly say to them, how can I help you? And they should be able to draw on one of those. But if we haven't had those conversations with our kids, then how can I help you? As soon as they go, I don't know, they feel like they've got their back against the wall. They will usually come out lashing and trying to control the situation. So, if we don't have haven't had those conversations, we can say to them, can I sit with you right now? Would you like me to be close or far away? Because especially when we're dealing with, some of the kids that we see through our agency, where regulation has been really impacted, they don't necessarily want a human close to them. So it's about, okay, how do I be near you, but far enough away that you can do your own, whatever you need to do, while I'm over here, so you still feel like you have the control of my presence there. So it's about learning that child's dynamic and figuring out how to go into it with them. When the child's having a behavior, it's not an excuse for us to have a behavior. That's when we need to adult.
Yeah. And yet, those mirror neurons, right? I always tell parents, you're not weak. It's just that we're so wired to mirror one another. Even a young child, there were many times when my kids were young that I looked like a 4-year-old having a tantrum at the same time, because those mirror neurons, like, you feel the tension and the emotion rising in you too. And it's very hard to differentiate. It's very hard to, your mood does not affect mine.
Yes.
It's so Instagrammable, but it's hard to do.
It is. And I always tell parents, challenge yourself when your kid is going up to go down. So when your kid's going up and up and up and up, I challenge you to get quieter and calmer and see how that works for you. Because the chances are that'll actually control your situation. You're giving your child control by not reacting, so they know they have a safe place now, because you need to be your child's safe place for them to, ping back and forth to. So give them that sense of control by getting calmer and holding their peace for them while they figure out how to come back to you. So if you figure out how to bring yourself down, you should start seeing a different response from your child as they try to go up.
Oh, I love that. That's really good, because we can remember go down, and then we can figure out what that looks like in the moment. We don't have to have that all figured out right now. I know the other night I was doing a parent group, and while I'm doing the parent group, my kids were like fighting, screaming, and I'm like leading this group, right? And I'm like praying, they can't hear a thing, right? Like, And then all of a sudden, my husband, I hear him yelling. And I'm like, oh my
Oh.
goodness, this is getting bad, and then they're yelling at him. And all of a sudden,
Mhm.
like, I didn't know what was going on.
Mhm.
As soon as I was able to break away from the group, because they had their small groups,
Mhm.
I, I was ready to charge into the living room and be like, what's going on? Right.
Right?
Instead, actually, this was one time. I have to share the one time I get it because I don't get it that often, right?
None of us do.
I took a nice deep breath
Mhm.
and I came in to the living room with this idea of I'm going to be curious. I'm
Mhm.
going to listen. I'm going to just say, so what is happening? And then they were able to tell me. And it was very, very simple. And so after the group time that I had, I just said to my oldest son, I said, you know what? I'm going to take you to Taco Bell.
Mhm.
And many people would think, why would you take a screaming child to Taco Bell? That's rewarding. I mean, but no,
Wow. Yeah.
it was awesome because we were able to get him out of the house, which was
Mhm.
step one. But then we were able to talk on the way.
Yes.
And I find with teenagers, especially, not face to face, they talk so much
Yes.
better. We're in the car.
Yes.
I can't lose it. Like he really opened up. And then of course feeding them, that helps
Mhm.
too.
Always food. Yeah. Yeah.
I came home and it was like nothing
Perfect.
happened. I'm so
Absolutely.
glad I didn't lose it. But like
Yeah.
I said, that's the one time I got it right. There's been many times that fix it mom,
Mhm.
fix it Felix, that old video game. I'm fix
Mhm.
it mom. I'm going to come in, I'm going to divide and conquer, and I'm going to make sure everybody's happy and everyone's going to do this now.
Right.
When I say now, well, what do I say? I forget what it is. I have a phrase, and when that phrase, like, that's it, that's it. When that phrase comes out of my mouth, like, something's about to go down, and
Yeah.
it's really not regulated at all.
Yeah, right. And that's such a good example because you followed it up by getting him out of the house. And I think that's something where we've been programmed to discipline and punish. And so what happens is when we're disciplining and punishing, we're controlling. So we need to balance that. I'm not saying don't ever discipline or punish because there's times where things need to be used appropriately. But what's the point? What would have been the point in punishing him? Absolutely nothing. You would have damaged your relationship with him. But as a society, it's like we feel like we need to for some reason punish that. We haven't figured we're moving towards, which I'm happy with some of this connection research that's coming out that is really proving our point that if you stop and connect with someone, that is going to bring down, like that is absolutely going to come down if we just stop and connect with someone.
Yeah, and the way
And
I used to deal with it was I would take things away, right? Like, I would take, say, his screens away.
Mhm.
And I find it interesting that now he has nightmares of me taking away his
Oh
stuff.
wow.
And I'm glad he tells me, but I'm
Mhm.
thinking, oh my goodness, what did I do? I didn't teach him a thing. All he knew was that I'm going to try to hide what I'm doing so that she won't take away my stuff.
Yes, and that's interesting you bring that up because control has with it, when you think of control, when you control something as a person, you have authority and generally fear. So then what you're doing to a child is you're bringing authority and fear to that child's life. So that child's not learning anything. They're just figuring out how to navigate fear. And then what do we know comes right on the heels of fear? Shame,
And and
right?
and and all of his dreams, when he tells me what they look like and what's going on in those dreams, it all I hear is shame, you know
Yeah.
and the inability to, because here's the thing, our kids, including my son, like, he doesn't want to get in trouble, he doesn't want to get his stuff
No,
taken.
yeah. Yeah.
So the fact that they're doing certain things doesn't mean, like, that they're bad or that they had it in their
Exactly.
head. By noon, I want to drive my mom crazy. Like, no, like, that's not in their plan, even though it seems like it.
Right? Some days they feel like they levitate out of bed and they hit the floor running. And we had one of those days a few days ago, and I thought, are you like, I wonder if you laid in bed before you levitated for that 3 to 5 seconds just to be like, I'm out to get them today. But they don't. They're just learning their environment. And I think, why do we have this preconceived idea that our children are born into the world that we have come to know, the environment we've come to know, and that they're going to know how to navigate it? They don't. So why do we keep expecting them to navigating it and use fear-based authoritarian control to help them achieve that. And I think when we stand back and we look at it, I mean, again, like you say, it's easier said than done because it's so easy to sit here and armchair this. But if we step back and we think about that when we're going into a situation, I think that can be our check to go, like, is this the hill I want to die on? Does this really matter in the scope of things? And if it doesn't, who cares? Why are we trying to control a child all the time? Why can't the child learn their own autonomy? And why don't we pick things like safety as ways of that is important? We need to learn safety rules. But there's other things I think where we can be more gentle on ourselves, be gentle on ourselves, be gentle on our children.
Yeah. I tell the story a lot of when my boys were younger and we were in the park and they were playing and my youngest son pulled my oldest hair and out came this very colorful word, which I won't even say on a webinar.
Oh.
And and the park was filled with 2-year-olds.
Mm-hmm.
And instantly, as soon as he screamed it out, I mean, every mom in the park gasped, including me. And instantly, where do their eyes go? From him to me.
Yeah.
What are you going to do, now that your son has thrown this awful word out and now my child knows this word? And I remember thinking in my head, that kid is in so much trouble. Like I'm thinking of all the things that I'm going to do to punish this kid because all these moms are now looking at me. I'm embarrassed and that is not acceptable. And I remember looking at him and he was humiliated. Like he heard the gasps. And his eyes welled up with tears. And I remember going up to him and saying, it's okay, son. We all make mistakes. And I grabbed his hand and I walked past the mob of angry moms. And one lady said to me, why don't you control your kid? And I remember saying to her, I don't control anybody. I control me. And that, of course, didn't go over very well. But again, like, where is these things coming from? For me, in that moment, my need to control was coming from the embarrassment and the expectations of other people.
Yes. Because we have systemically passed this through every generation. And you and I are talking about something that is, systems change. This is a developmental shift we're trying to do because this is what we're seeing, the same shame. And I think a lot of you had that embarrassment and humiliation and probably some shame around, oh my goodness, what just came out of my kid's mouth? But that, like you say, it was only there because the transgenerational patterns of what you'd been taught about what was wrong and right, and that control and fear that's been instilled into you in that situation came flooding out. And as a parent, when we talk, that's such an interesting thing to bring up because how do we control ourselves in that situation? You took an absolute step back and went, I'm going to deal with this differently and I'm not going to respond to the shame that was in the embarrassment that came flooding into myself. And that is precisely what we're talking about in controlling ourselves as parents. We have to make a concerted effort to step away from some of this stuff that has been generation after generation after generation and is imprinted into us. We have to take a conscious step to go, I'm not doing that anymore. I'm not going to let that mom shame control me anymore because I don't care. I'm raising the next generation of empathetic, kind-hearted children who are actually not going to run off of fear.
Oh, just think about those words for a second, everybody. What Jessica just said, we're not just in those moments responding to a situation. We're literally reshaping a generation. Just let that sink in for a second. And how that does take bravery. It takes a lot of bravery to go against the flow. I mean, thank goodness this is becoming more of a normal, it's researched. I know a mom, she's an older lady. She adopted a son and she wrote a beautiful book about the struggle she went through with him. And everybody was telling her, he needs discipline. He's a strong-willed child. You need to beat the discipline out of him. He needs this. And she went the opposite direction. And this was in the 80s.
Yeah.
I can't imagine the dirty look she would have gotten, but thank goodness this is becoming more normal. And now her son is thriving in his 30s.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And there you go. Right. And I love that. Let's beat them into submission. So my question would be, how well has that worked for us previously? Because I just have some, for me as a therapist, I'm like, if we beat all these people into submission, why are they all showing up in my counseling office? I have some questions about that. It clearly didn't work. So I'm not going to be part of the next generation that's going to beat children into submission. And I mean, for those of you who don't know what we do, I lead an organization who supports youth 11 to 24. So we have a lot of youth. We see about 1,000 kids a year that come through our building. And, I still use the same words with our youth as I do with my 4-year-old. And one of those things I say is, I see you're having big emotions. And it always stops the kids. And they'll look at me like, because you know what is the first thing is? I'm acknowledging them. I'm not telling them to be quiet in my building, or I'm not telling them, I mean, sometimes we tell them to be quiet, but I'm not telling them to stop it. I'm telling them, I see you have it. And they're like, oh. And sometimes all they need is that acknowledgement, because so often we've tried to control that. We see kids with big emotions and we calm down, be quiet. We always are issuing instruction, always issue control onto them. Calm down, be quiet, do it this way. You can't do that. You can't. Control, 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 control. But why don't we just validate it? I see you're having big emotions. I see you're happy. I see you're sad. I see you're crying. Because often that's all that's needed to bring our kids down one level, where they're at a level where it's like, oh, okay, I can deal with this.
Yeah. And they're feeling understood by you, which disarms them.
There you go. Mm-hmm.
And how much, I mean, even put it in our own perspective. Think about the times that we were losing it. We were having a bit of a hissy fit and our husband or our partner said, calm down. or give some kind of instruction. And it's like, I have a finger for you right now, like
what I actually think of you in that. But there you go. Issuing instruction when somebody's elevated doesn't work. So it just, like, pull it back, stop the instruction, stop telling people how they should feel and shouldn't feel, and just acknowledge it. I see you are. What can I do for you? How can I be with you?
Oh,
that's how we teach regulation.
So simple. So simple. It's like, why did this take so many years for us to figure this out? I'm wondering, just as people are listening to this, I remember when I was, maybe some people don't know, but our son really went through quite a mental health crisis, diagnosed with anxiety, depression, and was suicidal at age 8, which was my wake up call. I realized, okay, what I am doing is not working. And I mean, I've been working in mental health and resilience for 20 years, and I was book smart. That's what I was. And I remember, hearing this. I would have been in a webinar like this, listening to Jessica going, that sounds crazy. That sounds crazy. I don't know. Like, I don't think that's going to work. But I have to say that, digging really into this and diving into my own emotional regulation, really, I know some people say, oh, my kid has anxiety. I guess that's it. I guess my kid has depression. I guess that's it. Well, my son's now 13 and you would never guess he had that struggle, because I've worked very hard on myself. And out of that came a better emotional environment for my home. But again, like, I'm wondering what your thoughts are as you're listening to this, questions that are coming up, because what an honor it is to have Jessica here. You have a professional right here at your fingertips right now. You might not even know what to ask. You might have more of a statement, but I'm wondering, like, as we're talking, please feel free to write any questions or comments, because this is the moment for you. This is a time for you. And like we said, COVID could literally change your game. It's been so horrible on many levels, but one level I know for us is that home healed our family, being home. And now here we all are, home. So how can we help you?
And I love that somebody's put into the chat there that their son is 34 and they still lose it. And we lose it because we love them. Like, that's, you think about it, we don't lose it over things we don't love generally, right? And so when you think about it, of course, like, they're the people that are closest to us. They're the ones that we love. And so that's why we go into these with them, right? So I don't think there's an age cutoff where they're not going to, pull out that in our emotional regulation. Like, we're still going to need to help with that. And also, no matter how old your kids are, they look to you for regulation. We look to our parents for regulation.
That's true. My mom slammed cupboard doors. Guess what I do?
Right?
Jody says, growing up, emotions that might have been considered negative were not encouraged. Probably sadness and anger, I'm assuming. I don't think that helped. Absolutely. Anyone who is like a Gen Xer right here, like, emotions, even overly excited was never fully acceptable.
Yeah, absolutely. And so what does that look like then when you're trying to parent and give permission to your child to have emotions that you will have your own shame around, right? And that's a huge thing. And when I say like these people are showing up in my office, ding ding ding, like that's why, because I think a lot of people are like, I want to feel myself. Like, why do I have to not feel myself? Why can't I just feel myself? And I think that's just also amazing, because then that's we're healing generational stuff.
Yeah, we are healing generational stuff.
Right?
And what
Our
a
kids will heal us.
our kids will heal us.
Mhm,
Yes.
mhm,
I'm just seeing here, somebody just posted about your husband. You know,
mhm.
so teaching your husband to collect before direct, but I'm having trouble doing that with him. It's guys' brains are modeled also different than
Mhm,
us.
mhm.
And my husband, honestly, he still struggles. He still does not know how to just come alongside. That's still very much me leading that in my house.
There is, I just like, I know, I love that because he's a fixer. Yes, isn't that oftentimes what happens with a lot of dads? You become the fixer, right? There's T-shirts that even say it, and signs for garage. And so, what does that look like? So, if you can help him to understand that fixing is going alongside, it might click it in his brain because he's trying to fix. And so, if we might need to explain the loop of going alongside the child and going down when they're going up is actually fixing it. It's just the definition of fix is sometimes a little bit skewed according to what they've been taught in their generation.
Yes, yes. Well, because even Jessica, you were saying that your husband can relate to that.
Absolutely, absolutely, yeah. Because we were talking about he's of the age of your generation X there, and very much about like we were taught, like we were raised in a place where authority was used and control was used, and so how do you undo that? Because that's instinctually what pushes out is what you've been taught. And so, like these two things, I always laugh: parenting and learning to drive. Why are we the ones responsible for teaching it? Why isn't it taught somewhere else? We go to university for all sorts of things, but those two things, which are really two very important things, we're trying to hand down what we've been taught and trying to disseminate between what do I want to keep and what do I want to change and what applies for this generation and what doesn't. So if you have that step of being totally acknowledging that and being totally open to the fact that I know that in me I'm being triggered and this is my headspace, you'll generally kind of stop yourself or at least start to track your own patterns. So I always say, like, when people are coming in for therapy, like, if you're acknowledging it, you've got most of the battle won. Really, you do.
Yes, yes.
Mhm,
And,
mhm,
and Michelle is saying, she's validating, working hard to validate and acknowledge her daughter's emotion, giving words to them. So
mhm.
good. And Kristen, is saying that she's been hearing this for a while and she's taking baby steps. Yes, there's no way we're going to get all of this right now. And you know what? Like the lady with a 34-year-old son, we're on a real journey. And
We are.
and I know taking the pressure off of like,
Mhm.
I don't know. I always just say the resilience is in the repair. I
Yeah,
always come back to
yeah,
that.
yeah,
Every time I've lost it, I think, you know what, my kid's going to be okay if I learn how to repair when
yes.
I've blown it well.
Yeah. And I think that's actually really interesting for the next comment there about supporting versus not punishing losing it. So I think that that individual child who may have, it looks like that child has an ADHD, I would question around why is the child, so when that starts, that sort of behavior starts, that talking back and using that tone of voice, I would question if like why he feels like he needs, why that child feels like they need to do it. And if you can in that moment model something differently, then model it to help them to respond to you differently. Children will figure out the best way to get at you. And if that means that, help them to use a different way of getting to you. And it might be in the moment because sometimes at that age, it's really hard to like stop right away because they go into it so fast. So I would just kind of, how do we say this differently? How do I help you say this differently right now? Can you stop and hear your tone of voice? This is why. And I always, when I do something like that, I always equate it not just to you're being rude to me, because really, if the child finds out he's being rude to me, they're going to use that on us. So, in the world, that sort of tone of voice is very, maybe sounds very angry. So how do we help you to change your tone of voice? Could you re-say it for me in a different way and try to help that repair to happen? So they're learning it on the spot and they're equating it to the bigger environment, not just us. As soon as children hear how something impacts us, they store that nice little gem away because that's what they will use later.
Yeah,
Mhm.
yeah. And actually, next week, I have a psychologist that is specific to ADHD. So
Oh,
she'll probably have some tools there too, because
yes,
ADHD.
yes,
Bless
yes.
us all.
Oh,
Desiree has a question here. Is there any advice for helping relatives who feel you aren't handling things properly because of the generational gap to understand where you're coming from with this approach?
yes, that's one that comes up quite a bit. Yes, depends on their willingness to have a conversation with you. I have said to some people, ignore it because the truth always prevails. So while it might not feel like in the moment I might feel frustrated, but the truth always prevails. Or you can have some of these conversations around the difference between, your generation parented differently than my generation. I appreciate that you have an opinion about parenting, but I'm choosing to do it this way in my generation. And you can also, if they're open to it, you can add in things about, I've done my research, I have, or if that's going to be too threatening, you might just be able to gently tell them that it's none of their business. And really, it's not. And I think that's another thing that if we go back in those generations, there was, you do you remember how you kind of every parent could parent you?
Mhm.
And instead of being like, there's this whole concept of a collectivist society where you do have that support, but that looks different than every adult parenting you. So it is, I think we need to be empowered as parents to tell people to mind their own beeswax. We're parenting our children. As soon as people tell you how to parent, they're not helping you. When somebody aligns with you and says, I see you're struggling, how do I help you? Gee, that looks different because they're walking beside you. But when they're telling you how to parent, you have every permission to tell them to take a hike.
Yeah. And it's hard when your own family doesn't understand your kids. I know for me, like, that's been a real honest to goodness
Yeah.
struggle. They don't understand the way we're parenting to this day.
Yeah.
I just gave my mom a copy of my book. Here, read this. but like, that's, and they're set in their ways, and they've had their own journey. And I think just being okay. It takes so much bravery to just be like, I am parenting the way I need to.
Yeah.
And if you're approval addict like I am, and I like my mommy's approval, it's something I've had to really work through and lay down.
Well, you have the Brave Parent Institute for exactly these situations. Because it's taking a whole bunch of us to be really brave and do things differently to start to shift things. So I would encourage everyone, if you know that you are kind of facing this sort of, join the Brave Parent Institute. The more we have conversation about this, the more that we're going to reduce the stigma around and I kind of think of it from to a certain degree, we're cleaning up some transgenerational stuff, but that transgeneration, like those generations are still nattering at us while we're still cleaning up some of their stuff. And that happens every generation. There's a cleanup. And so I think in ours, like we can just very politely say, we're doing it the way we need to do it right now.
Yeah, yeah. And no, thank you for bringing up the Brave Parent Institute. That is something that I created because I didn't have the village around me, especially when we were in crisis. I didn't have a lot of friends who understood, didn't have my family. I mean, to an extent, they helped. But it's basically, if everyone just doesn't mind me sharing for just a moment what that is, it's a village of support. It's coaches that are willing to walk alongside you. It's a counselor who can help you. It's meal plans, fitness to help with your emotional regulation, and a group of people who basically, it's a no judgment, no shame zone, and it's a monthly membership. What I'll do is I'll put the link in the chat if you want to check it out. It does cost money because it costs money to pay coaches and people, but I'm paying them peanuts actually. It's embarrassing. That's one thing I'm really noticing right now is the people who really need support. we hear about all the resources out there. We hear about there's so much funding and there's so many things for parents in need. And then A, to find it, it's ridiculous. And then B, to access it is like loophole after loophole, which I
Yeah.
know you could speak to.
Yes. Yes. Exactly. So all our services are free, and you call one number. So we kind of solve that.
Which is amazing.
Yeah.
And in Camrose, like I was a little shocked. Camrose, I'm like, really? Does Camrose have problems? Like, I guess everywhere does, right? But the
We're
fact that
all
you have
together.
a thousand young people that you see yearly,
Yeah.
like, wow, and it's free. What a gift.
Right, and it's beautiful, because this is what we need. This is what we need, is an army around. We need connection. This is what my staff does every day, 24/7, 365. Connect with youth so that they have people around them, so that we are not doing so much intervention, we're doing prevention. And then we're going to systemically change our system so that we're creating resilience in our next generations.
I am so hopeful when I meet people like you, just because, and it's not easy
No, no,
what
it's
you're
not.
doing.
You know that. You're living and breathing it. It's not easy, right? But we're in it. And the important thing is we keep showing up to the fight.
Yes. And what is your website?
Yeah, so Camrose Open Door Association, or the Open Door, www.camroseopendoor.com. There's information on there. Honestly, you're going to find more information on our social media. So it's at Camrose Open Door on Instagram and on Facebook. If you want to get a hold of me, I'm just going to put my email address in the chat for you. And you're welcome. Anyone's welcome to reach out to me. I do therapy as well with families and with youth. So if you're interested in any of that, please let me know. We have a therapist team. I do some of the work on there. But if you need anything or have any questions, please reach out to me. I'm more than happy to at least answer questions or guide you in the right direction.
Yeah, and Jessica's amazing. Like I've been so impressed and just so blessed that you're out there doing the hard work, doing the worthy hard work.
Well, I have a whole team behind me, so I can't take any credit for that. We certainly have a stellar team who's a bunch of rock stars who really get it done.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah. And honestly, if I can encourage any parent on here, that a lot of times we just kind of bunker down and we put our face down, and we do this alone. And I know for me, when we were struggling, I didn't really know who to tell. I was very open on my Facebook. That's one thing. But actually asking for support and what I needed,
Yeah.
it was so hard. And uh, I feel like if parents could just come out of the woodwork and just take a brave step to reach out for help. And now you know what Jessica does, you know what I'm doing, and you reach out, get that first brave step. You just reach out and you will find absolute safety with Jessica and her team. You'll find safety with me. And I think that's what a lot of parents hide because of. They're afraid of judgment. They're afraid, but you don't know how messed up we are. And I just honestly, I don't think anything would shock you, Jess. Right?
We're
And
all struggling, and it's okay. Like no one's a perfect parent. So seriously, like, have the conversation, because you know what? No, it's not usually not shock worthy. I mean, everyone's struggling. Everyone's trying.
and everyone's struggling with things that like we feel like, oh my goodness, like we are the only ones, like no one ever would struggle with this kind of dysfunction. I remember saying to my family, like, how dysfunctional can we get? And honestly, we journeyed out of what I would consider dysfunction because we got brave, because we started to ask for support. But it was a little embarrassing at first, but honestly, the more you do it, you feel safer, you find the right safe people. Here we are. Okay. And it gets easier. I see too many parents hiding in shame, and I hear that stat, we're number 25 in the world for child safety, which tells me too many people are suffering alone. Don't do it alone. Just don't do it alone.
Yeah. Come out, have a conversation. Even if you don't know what to say, just say, this is what I see. Like honestly, no parent walks into our building and goes, I need help with coping skills and the development of strategies, and I want to increase my results. Who comes into an office and says that? That's words we use. So no, come in and say, this is what's happening. That's up to us to go, oh, okay, here's how we can help you. So don't feel like you have to come in and use big words. You don't.
Yeah. Yeah. Because many times nobody knows how they're feeling. Nobody knows what's going on. But that's why you have professionals and people, right? Yeah, no, that's great. Well, Jessica, I have loved having you on here. Like I could literally talk to you probably for hours.
Right? Yeah.
Um,
That happens every time we get a chance to talk. So, well, thank you for having me. And yes, anybody's welcome to reach out to me. You have my email address, social media. Reach out. Absolutely reach out to Connie. She's got amazing resources and a new book you need to buy because it's going to be sweet.
I happen to have it right here. No, I carry it around. It's just my house is small. It's on the coffee table right beside me. But yeah, it is here, and some have actually bought the book as a add-on to this webinar. So I'll get that to you right away. This will be sent out, this recording. So if you were like, oh, I wish I could just listen to that again or process it a little bit more, I will be sending this out in my weekly email. So look for it this weekend. And thank you so much again, Jess.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, and everyone have a great week. Oh, I wanted to finish my shirt. My shirt has our mantra on it without flashing my boobs in front of all of you. But I am brave. I show up when it's hard. I love without walls. I forgive when it hurts. And I rise through the storm. Have a great week, everyone. See you, Jessica.
Bye-bye.